Around 3,200 years ago, our planet held a connected world of superpowers, and then, within a single lifetime, almost all of them were gone. The Hittite Empire, mighty Egypt, the palaces of Mycenaean Greece, the rich port of Ugarit, the kingdoms of Cyprus and the Levant, all of them tangled together by trade and treaty. These were not scattered villages that faded quietly over centuries. They were the great powers of their age, and they collapsed almost at once, cities burning, kings vanishing, and entire scripts of writing falling silent. Historians have spent 100 years trying to explain how a whole interconnected world could die that fast, and I will be honest with you, we still cannot fully agree on why. Hello friend, I am Quill, and today we are walking back into the late Bronze Age, a moment far more modern than most people ever imagine. Picture the Eastern Mediterranean around the year 1250 before the Common Era. This was not a world of isolated tribes, it was a web of kingdoms that knew each other by name. Egyptian pharaohs wrote letters to Hittite kings, and Hittite kings wrote back, sometimes arguing, sometimes arranging royal marriages. We know this because a stack of clay letters survived in Egypt, the famous Amarna correspondence, diplomatic mail between the great courts. Kings addressed one another as brother, and they meant it as a statement about a shared club of superpowers. Beneath the palaces ran something even more important, a vast and delicate network of trade. The Bronze Age runs on bronze, and bronze is an alloy, roughly 9 parts. Copper to 1 part tin. Copper came largely from Cyprus, but tin had to travel enormous distances, some of it from as far away as Central Asia. That means to make a single bronze sword, materials from thousands of miles apart had to meet in the same workshop. No kingdom could arm itself alone, everyone depended on the flow of metal across the sea. We have actually found one of these trade ships resting on the seabed off the coast of Turkey. It is called the Uluburun wreck, and it went down loaded with copper ingots, tin, glass, ivory, and luxury goods from at least 7 different cultures. One sunken ship carried the fingerprints of an entire international economy. Grain moved too, shipped from fertile regions to feed cities that could not feed themselves. It was, in a very real sense, an early age of globalization, and like ours, it was efficient, wealthy, and quietly fragile. A system this connected has a hidden weakness. When every part depends on every other part, a shock in one place can travel everywhere. And around the year 1200 before the Common Era, the shocks began to arrive. The first enemy was not an army, it was the sky, because the rain started to fail. Scientists have studied ancient pollen trapped in lake beds and cores drilled from the sea floor. That pollen records which plants were growing, and around this time, the drought-loving plants take over. The evidence points to a long, punishing dry spell settling across the region. For a world of grain-fed cities, drought is not an inconvenience, it is a slow death sentence. We even have letters begging for help, one Hittite king writing about grain as a matter of life and death. A Hittite queen received a message that read, "There is no grain in my lands." The breadbasket was failing at the exact moment the population had grown to depend on it. Then the ground itself turned against them. The Eastern Mediterranean sits on active fault lines, and archaeologists have found a striking cluster of earthquake damage at many sites within a few decades. Some researchers call it an earthquake storm, a run of major quakes striking city after city in a short span of time. Toppled walls, collapsed columns, skeletons crushed beneath fallen stone, the destruction layers tell the story. Now imagine drought and famine and earthquakes hitting the same fragile trade network at the same time. Roads break, harbors crack, granaries empty, and the fear begins to spread faster than any single disaster. Hungry, frightened people start to move, and a moving, desperate population is its own kind of force. The world was not attacked from the outside all at once, it began to buckle from within. Into this weakened world came a name that still echoes with mystery, the Sea Peoples. Our clearest account comes from Egypt, from the reign of Pharaoh Ramses III, around the year 1177 before the Common Era. On the walls of his temple at Medinet Habu, carved in stone that you can still visit today, he tells of a great confederation coming by land and by sea. The inscriptions describe them sweeping down the coast, and they claim that no land could stand before them. The carvings show fierce sea battles, ships locked together, and captives with strange feathered and horned headgear. Ramesses claims a hard-won victory, boasting that he repelled the invaders from the shores of Egypt. But here is the honest problem that keeps historians awake: we still do not truly know who the Sea Peoples were. The Egyptian texts list names like the Peliset, the Shekelesh, the Shurden, and others, but those names are half understood at best. Were they raiders, refugees, migrating families, or a coalition of the displaced fleeing collapse elsewhere? The truth is probably tangled. They may have been both a symptom of the crisis and a cause of more of it. And while Egypt survived, though weakened, the lands to the north were not so lucky. On the coast of Syria stood Ugarit, a wealthy, literate port city plugged into all the great trade routes. In the ruins of Ugarit, archaeologists found something almost unbearably human, a final letter. It was a clay tablet still sitting in the kiln, left there to be baked, when the end arrived. The tablet quotes the last king, Amarna, and it is a cry for help. He writes that the enemy's ships had come and that his cities had been burned. He describes his own fleet as away in the land of the Hittites, and his own army stranded elsewhere. In other words, the defenders were scattered exactly when they were needed most. The tablet never finished baking, because the city fell before the fire could set the clay. Ugarit was destroyed and, unlike other cities, it was never rebuilt. Its story simply stops. And to the north, the greatest land power of them all was already coming apart. The Hittite Empire had ruled much of what is now Turkey, a rival strong enough to fight Egypt to a standstill. Its capital was Hattusa, a mountain fortress of massive stone walls, temples, and a great royal archive. When archaeologists uncovered Hattusa, they found that the city had been abandoned and burned. But the details are strange, and they hint at something more complicated than a simple sacking. The grain stores, the enormous silos that fed the capital, were found empty before the end. And the royal archive, thousands of precious clay tablets, was left behind rather than carried to safety. It looks less like a city taken by surprise, and more like a capital that was deliberately evacuated, then left to die. The Hittite king and court seem to have simply walked away from the center of their world. One by one, the great palaces of the age went dark. Across the sea in Greece, the Mycenaeans had built citadels of stone so massive that later Greeks believed giants had stacked them. These were the palaces behind the legends of Troy, of Agamemnon, and the heroes of Homer. The Mycenaean kingdoms ran on writing too, using a script we call Linear B to track their goods and their gods. And then, across the region, the palaces burned, and the system that fed them shattered. Here is the detail that still stuns me the most. When Mycenae fell, the ability to write vanished with it. Linear B was a tool of the palace bureaucracy, used by scribes to run the economy. And when the palaces died, the scribes and their knowledge died too. Greece did not just lose its kings, it lost the very skill of writing for roughly 400 years. Think about that, an entire civilization forgetting how to read and write, sliding into a long silence we call a dark age. Populations shrank, villages emptied, and the grand stone citadels became ruins that people would later mistake for the work of giants. The memory of this lost golden world survived only as myth, half-remembered heroes echoing down the centuries. When the writing stopped, so did most of the history, and that silence is exactly why the collapse is so hard to explain. So what actually destroyed the late Bronze Age world? Was it really just those mysterious raiders from the sea? For a long time the sea peoples took most of the blame, the convenient villains in a simple story. But modern scholarship, and here I have to point to the historian Eric Klein and his book named simply 1177 BC, tells a deeper tale. Klein argues that no single cause can carry the weight of a collapse this total. Instead he describes what researchers call a systems collapse, a cascade of failures feeding one another. Picture it as a line of dominoes: drought topples the harvests, famine topples the cities, earthquakes topple the walls. Trade routes break, so the tin and copper stop flowing, so the armies cannot be armed, so the borders cannot be held. Refugees and raiders take advantage of the chaos. And each shock makes the next one worse. The very thing that made this world so rich, its deep interconnection, is the thing that let the collapse spread everywhere at once. When you build a system where every part needs every other part, you also build a system that can fail altogether. That is the lesson that makes this ancient story feel uncomfortably close to home. And yet, for all our science, the heart of the mystery is still open. We still cannot fully decipher who the sea peoples truly were, or where they came from. We still argue over how much blame belongs to the climate, to the earthquakes, or to human choices. The final answer is buried in destruction layers and in tablets that were never finished, in words that stopped mid-sentence. This was a world as connected and confident as it was fragile, and it slipped away almost within living memory of itself. I love this story because it is a puzzle with real pieces missing, a genuine mystery that history has not solved. So I will leave the question with you, my friend. Do you think it was the climate, the earthquakes, the raiders, or all of it working together at once? Thank you for exploring the ruins of the Bronze Age with me, and for being the kind of curious mind that follows a mystery to the very end. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to the History Vault so we can keep digging up the lost world together, because there are so many more mysteries waiting for us. Until next time, keep asking the good questions, and I will see you back here in the vault.